grew up on the edge of the Vanderite Slough, which had little tributaries that would feed into the Myakka Lake. And the little tributaries were always more exciting just because there was more immediate life happening at that time. I'm Jeff Palmer. I'm a wildlife photographer, and I grew up here on the Myakka. When I personally talk about the Myakka, it's not about the park, and it's not about the river. It's about the landscape. The landscape that surrounds the Myakka feeds the Myakka. Most people think that the river feeds the landscape, but the landscape actually feeds the river. There's no springs, and without the rain collecting on this landscape, we have no river. My father migrated here in '45 after the war. Fell in love with this place. He called it paradise. Growing up here, I have to agree. He loved to hunt, and it was almost a spiritual moment for him. We spent a lot of time in the woods. The enjoyment that he instilled in me allows me to enter their life in a fashion that I don't believe a lot of people ever get to see. My father was an avid outdoorsman, so we were constantly in the woods. And the things I would see and tell people about back at school, and it was just phenomenal. One day, the family was out. It was a Sunday, and we pulled up on a little flag pond, and there was a doe deer standing out in that flag pond, and she lifted her head up and she looked directly at us. And at that moment, I think something in my brain clicked and, pretty much changed my way of looking at things. I think from that moment, I had felt I was supposed to be carrying a camera. I quit hunting when my father passed away. He was my hunting buddy. By then, I'd already really started a deep love for all wild things. And what I learned from him was to take the time and pay attention. And you just become part of the landscape. And I have learned that if I'm willing to give my time, the wildlife will accept me. I no longer take a life. I hope I'm inspiring life. The ranchers came to the Myakka region before the Civil War. They had to live off the land. And they soon found that the land could support their families, their cattle, and the wildlife that surrounds them. In the early 1900s, Bertha Palmer moved down here from Chicago and bought up a large swath of land along the Myakka. The Carleton and Longino families raised cattle and timber throughout the Myakka region. These families created conservation easements to help protect their heritage, their landscape, and the wild Myakka. Ranchers have played an important role throughout this region and still play an important role. Without their knowledge of managing this landscape, the landscape would probably be a housing development, a shopping center, or a parking lot. Wildlife biologists are working with the ranchers in the Myakka region to better understand the newly established predator coyote.
So straight ahead.
Straight ahead, little to the left.
Hang on a sec. I think I just saw him. Well, at least we got eyes on it.
As a boy, in the summer months, you could always look east and watch the thunderheads build. And by a certain time of the day, the rains would start. This was pretty much like clockwork. When the landscape held the water, you could always go out and stomp a puddle. I'm always looking for creatures that are nesting, raising families. Creates a little bit of drama. Crested caracara, that is one thing that really excites me. To be able to come out here to the Myakka now and watch a pair of them neck like a pair of teenagers. They mate for life. They nest in the same area year after year. And when I was a boy, I'm talking 45 years ago, we would have to travel to a ranch over in Okeechobee County just to get a glimpse of one. So to be able to come out here to the Myakka and see them today, knowing that their home range is spread, that's pretty exciting. When I hear sandhill cranes, it's hard for me to imagine that same sound echoed across our landscape over 12,000 years ago. They share the duties of building the nest, and they share the duties of sitting on the nest, and then they change post. While one is out foraging, the other will sit. The cranes make a very strong bond. They make a very strong parent. Most nests have two hatchlings. They're quite clumsy, and they stumble around, and I can sit there for hours just watching. And if I'm lucky, they'll let me. I like to think that my films, my photography, inspires people. I'd like to think that they can feel what I feel. And if they can, then I've done my job and I've inspired. The back corner of the Van der Wright Slough, my father's children all learned to hunt. There was a particular tree there that we had all sat under. We'd all learned a lot of life there. We watched the day begin and we watched the day end. And my father's still there. And if I'm lucky, I'll be right there with him.